Thank you, both our colleagues, for training these boys, being with them, toning when necessary as well. And without further ado, may I now call upon Mr. Masood Haq to kindly take over the chair and continue with the debate this evening. Sir.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad I was introduced long ago and not called up then because the eyes were misty and I would have choked. I couldn't have possibly conducted this debate. In fact, I'm still choking. Sorry. I'm truly humbled. But now, to get on with the proceedings, I want to remind you, Mr. McFarland mentioned the cacophony, the screaming and the shouting. It's still the same as it was 40 years ago. And I can't for the life of me remember what it was about and what you all screamed and shouted about. I left the school and my last year was in 1974. And that's when the great fight happened in Zaire. You all weren't even born then. The rope-a-dope. Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, and it was Ali Boumaier. And I read 2 days later outside the chapel, you know, we used to get the Pioneer and the Herald. I read the results of that fight 2 days later, maybe. So today, in memory of that, I'm going to tell you, have a blast. Ali Boumaier, whatever that means. Scream, shout as loud as you want to. We're going to have fun today, and it's a lovely topic that's come up. The judges have been introduced, so I'm not going through the list of the judges, but I just go into the background of the format of this debate. It's the same as what happened earlier today in the girls' school. Assigned to Guantanamo Bay, how do you pronounce that? Guantanamo Bay, and confined there for 2.5 hours. And the Calcutta team chose the topic, and then there was a toss and a withdrawal, and Calcutta chose to speak for the motion. The motion today is democracy is not the best form of government. Interesting topic, not open-ended at all. It's like cut to the chase, and I'm sure the Calcutta boys are going to enjoy this very much because it's right up what I'm not going to say more because I have to go back to Bengal and so do they. But let me run through the rules first briefly. The principal speakers, I don't think I need this fan. Oh, I'm fine. The principal speakers from each side will get 5 minutes each. And at the end of the 4th minute, there will be a bell. They are requested to wind up their arguments by the 5th minute. If they overstep, I gather there's no penalty, but the judges are advised to put on their earplugs and not listen to what they're saying. Similarly, for the other speakers, it's 4 minutes and the bell goes at 3 minutes. They are advised not to go beyond 4 minutes. After each speaker has presented his or her argument, 2 minutes are for rebuttal. The rebuttal shall consist of questions being asked by the opposing speakers during this rebuttal process. The questions must be confined to the substance of the speech that immediately precedes it. A maximum of 2 questions may be asked by the opposing team. Now, what I saw today, this morning, in the girls' school, if you hedge, hum, and haw, and if you prolong it, then you can manage two questions. But you answer quickly, then a third comes, and a fourth comes. So my advice to speakers is to be a little clever. Cross-questioning shall not be permitted. Only the time taken to answer the questions shall be taken into account. The questions themselves shall not be included in the 2 minutes allotted for rebuttal. Although marks shall not be provided for the questions asked by the opposing speakers, the judges are requested to take into account the quality of the questions posed when assessing the overall impression of the team. Speakers shall be permitted to use the use of flashcards and may refer to notes. However, judges are requested to note that continuous reading shall be penalized. After all the speakers have presented their arguments, the principal speaker on either side shall sum up the arguments for the team. The principal speaker of the opposition shall sum up first as normal. The supporting speakers shall take no part in the summing up, but may assess the principal speakers. The principal speaker of each team shall be given 4 minutes to sum up the arguments. Obviously, there are no rebuttals there. Points are awarded for the following: content 20, delivery 5, argument 5, rebuttal 10, summing up by the opening speaker 10, general impression of the team 10. Now, getting back to the debate. As I said, they were there in Guantanamo Bay 2.5 hours. They were in the library. They were allowed internet access, no access to, oh, by the way, if you can keep your communication devices off, that would be nice. They were not allowed communication devices there either. But I'm not sure whether they were allowed access to Google Chat or Skype or whatever. It hasn't been mentioned to me. Anyway, for the motion today is La Martiniere Boys Calcutta, very aptly keeping up the spirit of things in Calcutta and West Bengal. Tanuj Luthra, the principal speaker. May we have him on stage? Arka Banerjee Chaudhary, or would it be Orko Banerjee Chaudhary, the second speaker. Odito Shorkar, the third speaker. And Ujon Purokayasto, the reserve speaker. Please do sit down. The one mistake I've made is that there is a fourth speaker, not part. Please. The fourth speaker, after the debate is over and the judges are deliberating, the fourth speaker comes up and addresses you, and the fourth speaker is allowed to assist his team. The principal speaker. Mohammed Zaid, the second speaker. Mohammed Zaid. Anand Khanna, the third speaker. And Yash Joshi, the reserve speaker. Are we ready, ladies and gentlemen? Are we all ready, gentlemen, to go? I must request you, no, I know you can't help it. You know, when the interjections happen and when somebody replies, there's a huge furor and there's a huge applause from the audience. It's either, you know, to throw the interjector or to encourage the person being grilled. Now, you should do that in the true spirit of Zaire, but I request you speakers here, who's interjecting and who's getting interjected, not to be thrown by that or duly enthused by that, because the answer or the questions may not be quite to the point. Okay, we begin with The Martiniere for Boys, Kolkata, Tanuj Luthra, your time starts now.
Schadenfreude. German for joy derived at the expense of others, at the expense of the misfortunes of others. Ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what I feel debating this motion, debating this side of the motion today. It is their misfortune that they have to defend a system of government which is so inherently flawed that they have to exalt this very system to the level or to the status of being the best form of government, which is not the inherent truth. Respected chairperson, members of the House, honorable judges, and my most worthy opponents, democracy is not the best form of government. And I stand here firmly proposing today's motion. At the very outset, allow me to define the key terms and phrases of today's motion. Democracy is a system of government wherein the people vote in elections and choose the people that will govern them. Now, what is a good or a bad form of government? It has three inherent aspects. The first, ladies and gentlemen, is the relationship between the state and between the subjects. The second is the policy framework, or the creation of policies that will be enacted by that form of government. And the third, of course, is the manner in which the government goes about implementing those very policies after it has framed them. On all three fronts, it is our prerogative, and I assure you that we will pass in this duty to prove to you how democracy on all three fronts of being a form of government is most definitely not the best form of government. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at the very outset, let me break this cognitive bias. We have a cognitive bias, and we think that democracy is the be-all and end-all of good governance. We think that it is the bastion of good governance. This, ladies and gentlemen, is far from the truth. Democracy is the most popular form of government. It is the most convenient form of government. It is the form of government that has stood the test of time, that has survived the test of time. However, this does not make it the best form of governance. This brings me to my constructives, ladies and gentlemen. The first point, the views of the people in a democracy, which is the very ethos of what a democratic government is, might not necessarily be synonymous to what is better or what is good or what is best for a nation. Just because in a country of 1.2 billion people, you have the majority holding a view, and you have the government acting upon that view held by the majority, this does not mean that this is a pathway for the progressive development of a country. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, in a democracy, you never ever have 100% voters turnout, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, the elected government in a democracy might not truly represent the aspirations of the people, whether the aspirations are for the better or for the worse of the country. And this point will be further elaborated and elucidated upon by my second speaker. Our second point of access is a rather obvious one. It talks about the inherent flaws of a democratic system of governance. What are these flaws, ladies and gentlemen? Stagnation. Because you have a clash and coexistence of multifarious views and multifarious opinions in a democratic government, you have policy which leads to stagnation in a country. It leads often to regression in a country, and it impedes your progress and it impedes your development of a nation. The second point of how democracy as a system of governance is flawed. Retention of power. Due to the brevity of the term that the government serves, more emphasis is laid on retaining power by these governments and less emphasis is laid on improving the system of governance. Now, there are several other flaws. For example, majority dictatorship over minorities, flaws that will be highlighted upon again by my second speaker. Our third point of access is that the ideals that flourish or thrive in a democratic system, such as the right to information, such as the freedom of expression, are not part of a democratic government. We are arguing the tenets of a democratic government which is of, by, and for the people. Ladies and gentlemen, my third speaker will conclusively show you how ideals that thrive or that we associate with a democracy can exist in other forms of government as well. Democracy has not copyrighted these ideals. It has not established an autocracy on these ideals. The opposition, my dear opposition, will come up here. They will quote the Article 19 and Article 21 of the Indian Charter, of the Indian Constitution. And they will say that democracy means rights and freedoms of the people. They will tell you that you in a democracy hold the power, and that which is why it is the best form of governance. I urge you not to be swayed by this fallacy and to look beyond the bias that we all have, that democracy is the best form of governance, because it's not. It might be the most convenient, but it most definitely is not the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanul. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, you talked about how in a democracy as in India, we do not have 100% voter turnout. So are you in fact against democracy, or do you want to enhance democracy?
All right. Thank you for your question, sir. So when I talk to you about democracy as a form of government, it creates a scope for such inherent flaws to manifest themselves. Let me talk to you about the United States of America at the time of George Bush.
No, I think you're going off the point. What is your question?
So my question to you was that instead of actually opposing democracy, you've criticized how it does not have a 100% voter turnout. So you want a 100% voter turnout. So you actually want to enhance democracy and not remove it.
No, ladies and gentlemen, my point was that in a democracy, the views of the people, or the views of the 75 out of 1,000 people that actually do go and vote, might not be synonymous to what a country needs, might not be synonymous to what is best for a government, what is the best form of government, which is the scope that democracy provides in a government. The views of the people might not be what is needed. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, the views and policies of the government might not be accepted by the people. They might not be in tune with what the people require, which is an inherent flaw in the very concept of a democratic institution, of a democratic governance, which is why it is not the best form of government.
Does that answer your question?
It did not sufficiently enough. Now, Sir, second question.
That's the second question.
Second question.
That's the last one.
So, Mr. Speaker, so what would you say is the best form of government? You cannot just be Aam Aadmi Party. You cannot just go about criticizing everything that exists. You have to give a solution.
Certainly not democracy. That is definitely begin this debate. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you, by the time we are done with this debate, by the time my third speaker shreds apart whatever is left of your argument, you will conclusively that there are other forms of government. There are other forms of government that might not be viable to exist in our current state of affairs, because we as humans have this bias towards democracy. It might exist in a utopia, ladies and gentlemen, but it will prove to be the best form of governance. Democracy, as you will say, exists in a very pure form. However, that is not at all true. The way in which democracy is implemented today is not synonymous with what is best for nations. Thank you.
I think the time is up. Thank you. No, your 2 minutes are over. I'm not going to make it that easy for either Lucknow or Calcutta to be cheering like that. You know, I would like you to understand that rebuttal means, even 40 years ago, you're asked a question, you don't theorize in the answer. You come to the point and you answer. If you go into a long spiel, it might get you cheers from your team. Lucknow will get cheers from Lucknow team, Calcutta from Calcutta. But an answer, a question warrants an answer, and that is what rebuttal is all about. Anyway, the next speaker from across the floor, Mr. Raghav Kohli, the principal speaker for Lucknow Martiniere.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's debate is this House believes that a democracy is not the best form of government, and we today shall be opposing the motion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we present our arguments, let us define what a democracy is. As all of us know, a democracy is a form of government the proposition today to tell you how other forms of government, in other forms of government, happens more effectively, how they are actually, how representatives are responsible to the people. Now, the next point, ladies and gentlemen, is the scope to correct mistakes. Now, I completely agree with the proposition when they say that we don't always make the right choice when it comes to elections. We might choose people who then in future turn out to be corrupt, and they turn out to be insensitive to the issues which really affect us. But the fact is that a democracy gives us a chance to correct those mistakes which other forms of government don't. Talk about a monarchy. Over there, the king is the supreme head, and no matter what, you cannot impeach a king by any sort of government process. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the things a democracy provides, and these are things which all of us should value. Next, ladies and gentlemen, is the right to protest and right to criticize. For example, in 1971, ladies and gentlemen, people in China protested against the crush the revolt. Ladies and gentlemen, they sent in the army to crush a civilian revolt. And we feel that if a government only cares about the economic progress of the country and does not actually care to fulfill the aspirations of the people, we feel that the point of a government is lost. Now, the second speaker of my team will talk about the system of checks and balances in a democracy and the point of the judiciary, while the third speaker will talk about examples of different governments and different forms of government and compare them with a democracy and show you how democracy, in fact, is the best form of government. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to conclude with a quote by Winston Churchill. He said, democracy is the worst form of a government, except all the other forms of government that have existed till now. Thank you.
There, for you, Calcutta, the sacrificial lamb.
Thank you for your speech, sir. Sir, you mentioned about how in your very first constructive, that a democracy gives power to the hands of the people and how people have the right to self-determination. So where do you draw the difference between how democracies forming today in the world are different from the way democracies ought to function and different from the way mobocracies function?
I completely agree with one inherent flaw a democracy has, and that is when my friend here says that the will of the people is not adequate, is not represented to the capacity it ought to represent. I completely agree with you. But the fact is, when you compare it to other forms of government like a monarchy or even a communist form of government, compare it to an autocracy, compare it to an aristocracy, compare it to any authoritarian regime in this world, the point is that the aspirations of the people are at least represented. Tanuj talked about how 70% of the aspirations are represented.
We are not talking about Tanuj now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Even if 100% is not represented, even if 7% to other forms of government, the aspirations of the people are actually heard. And that is the point we are actually trying to prove today. Democracy is not a perfect form of government. It is the best form of government which we have here today.
Is that because it's
Through the course of my speech, I talked to you about what a democracy provides and how other forms of government fail to provide all those things. I talked to you about how the power is in the hands of the masses. I talked to you about how democracy provides us human rights and fundamental freedoms. I spoke to you about how we have a system of checks and balances. I spoke to you about how we have a scope to correct our mistakes in a democracy. I spoke to you about how we have the right to protest and the right to criticize the government. When you compare all of these things with other forms of government, like I have been mentioning before, and I'm thoroughly disappointed because you never understood my answer completely. Ladies and gentlemen, before before you start taking your shirts off, let me complete my answer. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand that when we talk about this topic, we are talking about democracy being the
I
best.
I think it's over. 2 minutes are over. Yeah. On my part, I'll reserve my comment. Uh, I move on to the next speaker from the Martiniere, Calcutta. That is Arka Banerjee Chaudhary. Orko Banerjee Chaudhary.
Respected Chairperson, sir, with your prior permission. Talking about the burden of proof that has become the crucial point in today's debate, what we side proposition are doing here today is not simply bash or decry the form of government known as democracy. What we are doing here today is not simply telling you that, look, these are the flaws that we have with our existing form of governance, which is democracy. What we are essentially doing, ladies and gentlemen, is tell you that, look, these are bring up subsequently in our speeches. In such a form of governance, we can establish without any doubt that better forms of government do exist. And when we are talking about the best form of governance, it clearly isn't democracy. Mr. Winston Churchill once said that the first argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. And I had such a conversation with one person from this very institution who I would identify as a common man, as a representative of the common man's opinion. The person I'm talking to you about is Mr. Shailesh Kumar. I don't know if you recognize him by his name, but he is one of the people who work as a security guard in this very institution. And discussing politics in Uttar Pradesh with him, the final identification of the problem of the people of Uttar Pradesh and the reason why we have a Mulayam Singh government now and why, according to him, this will not come back to power is because Akhilesh Yadav had promised 3 lakh laptops but has only given 17,000. You might be wondering, why am I talking to you about this? I tell you this because today the common man votes on issues that are quite superficial. Today the common man votes on issues that would appear irrelevant, and these are one of the main problems with the concept of democracy. They spoke about the power of the common opinion. I tell you that this very common opinion is misused by the political classes because they know that by appealing to prejudices, by cheap populistic tactics, by vote bank politics, by blatant demagoguery, as I would like to call it, they appeal to these prejudices, and by appealing to these prejudices, they use that very powerful concept of the common opinion and actually denigrate the system of governance that the side opposition have spoken so highly of. Now, moving on to the next point. You see, today, political parties appeal to identities, individual identities. You have Mulayam Singh Yadav, who considers himself the sole representative of the farmers. You have Behenji Mayawati, who considers herself as the sole representative of the Dalits. And I'm not only talking about political parties in Uttar Pradesh. I have nothing much to boast about the political parties in my own state, where Mamata Banerjee identifies herself as the messiah of the Muslims in West Bengal. They appeal to these tactics because by identifying to such populist measures, they actually do what is the major problem with our democracy, which is by identifying to these tactics, they denigrate the concept of democracy by misusing the common opinion. Because today we have a majority dictatorship, as we would like to call it. And the first past the post system which we have today in India is not a true representative of the opinion of the people in the first place. And I'll give you an example to point it out, because BSP has 27% vote share in Uttar Pradesh, but they don't have a Lok Sabha seat, whereas BJP has only India, but they have a brute majority in parliament today. And there are many other problems with democracy, be it nepotism, be it dynastical politics, be it the endemic corruption that is prevalent in our system today, be it bureaucratic red tapeism, be it the policy paralysis and administrative deadlock that we see every day. Perceived sense of equality, which is actually not true. Because, and forgive me for breaking into the vernacular, we admit that क्यों एक दिन बड़े बड़े वादे और 5 साल काम नहीं, we admit to that, but still we think it is our democratic right to vote, and we go out there knowing fully well that my vote will not make a difference, because if one political party goes and the next comes in, the policy will not change, no real good will come for the people. So what people believe as the real good for may not actually be what is best for them. And that is why we say that a meritocratic system of government, a government that I envisage to be run by bureaucrats and technocrats and IS officers instead of cheap politicians or film stars who are now becoming elected, that is a form of government.
Orko, I will have
conclude,
to...
sir, if I may make my concluding statement.
I thought your conclusion was over long ago. No.
Sorry, thank you, sir.
Okay. You see, we must respect the time limit, Orko. You know, you are from Calcutta, so am I. और बांग्लाয় बोले ना फ्री ते गाड़ी बा माइक्रोफोन फैले के उछाड़े ना, मतलब हिंदी में कहते हैं फ्री में माइक्रोफोन या गाड़ी मिले तो कोई नहीं छोड़ता है। हाँ, लेकिन यहाँ आपने मेहनत की है, माइक्रोफोन आपका हक है, लेकिन हम लोगों ने कुछ स्लॉटिंग किया है, सो प्लीज रिस्पेक्ट दैट। यस, वुड यू लाइक टू टेक ऑन?
Mr. Speaker, you talked about how opinions are misused by the government today. The fact that, don't you think that the fact that a person can voice his opinion, and the fact that you can actually hear his opinion, and the fact that he can expect something from the government is only possible in a democracy?
Thank you so much, sir, for your question. I was expecting a question of this sort. I am not telling you that the opinion of a common man has no value. And please, do not say that the democratic form of government is the only way a person can express his opinion, because there have been several tried and tested forms of government where people have expressed their opinions. I tell you something very important today, that freedom of speech or freedom of expression, these concepts that you also brought up in your speech, are not part of democracy. They can exist in other forms of government as well. But moving on to the more important point, the opinion that is expressed of the people, is it actually of the best interest of the people? A democratic form of government where in a majority ruled, in a majority dominated country, we rule in political parties who we think will give us certain favors. Is it actually the best? Today in this auditorium, many of us, let's say the members of the debating team, we believe that it is in our best interest. We believe it is our opinion that by having the brilliant ice creams that are found in the carts outside, we will be able to do well in the debate. However, our secretary, Mr. Dev, exercises prudence and says that, look, if you go and have that ice cream before your debate, you might choke, you might not be able to speak properly in the debate later on. So you see, even though this is the opinion that we express, even though this is what maybe all the members of the debating team might want, it is not necessarily of the best interest for us or for anybody else, for the country at large, if you were to take this example and transfer it to India or to any democratic form of government, that the opinion of the people is always of the best interest of the people, because we know by misusing this opinion, by misusing the power of the common opinion, politicians have tried their tactics over years and years and years, and today we still cannot confidently say that the form of government we have, known as democracy in India or any other country for that matter, is truly a best form of government or a good form of governance for that matter.
Well answered, very well answered. But I'll be honest, he had answered it in the first 2 sentences. You need not have, I mean, it was a very, very cogent answer. The first 2 sentences were enough. You could have taken 2 more questions. Anyway, I think the time, we have time? We don't have time. So, I'm sorry, 2 minutes over. I would advise speakers to try and take as many questions as possible. You know, that's nice. His answer was brilliant. Actually, I think he concluded very well, and in 2 sentences, he need not have carried on. He could have taken maybe 2 more. Okay. Now, from across the floor, Mohammed Zaid from LUCKNOW, Martiniere.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The motion before the House today reads, democracy is not the best form of government, and we are opposing this motion. And ladies and gentlemen, let us try to analyze the arguments that we have heard so far from the other side of the House. Now, the other side of the House today comes up and debases the sanctity of democracy and accuses that us of, equating democracy with mobocracy and majoritarian rule, and calls democracy a dictatorship of the majority. But we need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that a very essential feature of a democracy, what sets it apart from democracy, ladies and gentlemen, is the fundamental rights and the civil liberties that guarantee that it will not be a dictatorship of the majority over the minorities. It will be a system where the minorities' interests will be safeguarded before the needs and aspirations of the majorities, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, that point, ladies and gentlemen, falls. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, let us try to understand. May I just say that I had the utmost respect. I still do have, great respect for my fellow debaters. But ladies and gentlemen, I really did not expect this debate to turn out to be an English lecture in English. Ladies and gentlemen, understand that good, better, and best are actually degrees of comparison. And they are not things that you can use, just use in absolute words. You have to talk about them in a relative sense, which is what we have done so far. Which is why we say that in order to show that democracy is not the best form of government, you have to come with a form of government that is better than the democracy, that has all the values that democracy has and addresses all the concerns that you have raised. And the first speaker, ladies and gentlemen, promises us that they will come up with such a form of government by the end of the second speaker's speech. But we do not hear any such suggestion in the second speaker's speech as well. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, they have failed in their fundamental duty today. Also, ladies and gentlemen, let us try to discuss and thereby understand the fundamental inherent features of a democracy that set it apart from the rest of the forms of government that we have and have had in the past. Ladies and gentlemen, the fundamental rights and the civil liberties that are guaranteed to a citizen, the right against oppression, the surety, the guarantee that the state cannot unreasonably intervene on your privacy, in your private life, and the right and the guarantee that they will not encroach upon your civil liberty and will not take away what is truly yours. That is something, ladies and gentlemen, that is truly essential to an individual's overall development, because it gives it a sense of validity, a sense of importance, and a sense of security, which is really important for an individual's and a citizen's overall development, which would then contribute to the overall development of a country and by extension of the world. Which is why we feel that being a system of government that ensures such values to be upheld, that ensures that such values are upheld, ladies and gentlemen, we feel that it is better than all the rest. Why do we say that democracy is the best? We say so because it is better than all the rest, ladies and gentlemen. It is a comparative term. You cannot say it in isolation. You cannot talk about it in absolute terms. Also, ladies and gentlemen, understand that other forms of government like aristocracy and monarchy flow from a certain belief of superiority and elitism in a certain class or a particular person. And that fundamental belief in superiority and elitism is counteractive of the goals of peace and development and equality, ladies and gentlemen, which we as a progressive society, as a society that believes that all men are created equal, ladies and gentlemen, in principle, ladies and gentlemen, seek to uphold. Which is why we feel that it would be really counteractive to say that there are other forms of governments today that are better than democracy, and they come up and tell us that democracy is the most convenient form of government and it is stood the test of time. It is a form of government that has stood the test of time and has been here for the longest time. But don't you feel that there is a very good reason that it has stood this long? Ladies and gentlemen, the reason is that it has fulfilled, more or less it has fulfilled the aspirations of the people better than any other form of government has so far. And with that, I would like to rest my case.
Any questions?
So you accused us the proposition of not suggesting any alternative forms of government, whereas we clearly envisaged a a type of government where merit would be representative in the way we have in the governments we represent. So do you not believe that a meritocratic system, which would actually have a government which is run by, let's say, bureaucrats and technocrats instead of gundas and local political leaders who have vested interests in populism measures, that is selected by majority authoritarianism, do you not believe that a meritocratic system would be better than the existing form of democratic system that we have?
No, I do not believe so, because we have gone down that road, Mr. Interjector, because we have had aristocracies of intellect in the past, and we have seen that in all of these cases, there has not been one exception to this rule, ladies and gentlemen, that all of these aristocracies have in fact degenerated into oligarchies, and these leaders, these distinguished people with certain special skills and abilities have always tended to serve their own interests, feather their own nest, and ignore the public and societal good, which is why we feel that a democracy is way better than a meritocracy or an aristocracy of intellect.
That was probably the shortest answer so far.
So you began and ended your speech by enlisting the fundamental rights that are that every human being should be able to exercise. Do you not agree that these fundamental rights can exist in other forms of government, like communist governments, like dictatorships, in theory?
What? Could you just repeat
Do you
that
not
again?
agree that these rights can exist in theory, that there is no hard and fast rule that these rights must exist in a system where the government is elected by vote? Can they not exist in other systems as well, which would perhaps maximize our development potentialities?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say no, because when the moment you say that there's a monarch, the moment you say that there is one ruler that is supreme than everyone else that is supreme and is superior to everyone else in that particular constituency, you are denying everyone of the fundamental right to equality. So we do feel that even in theory, the fundamental rights and civil liberties that you are guaranteed and assured in a
he's not
democracy.
denying that. What he's saying is, in other systems, do you think this cannot exist?
Sir, he mentioned a communist government and a monarchy, and I'm telling him why in a monarchy we cannot have the fundamental rights to, the way we have it in a democracy.
Okay. Does that answer your question? From the proposition now, Aditya Sharkar, the third speaker, the Martiniere, Calcutta.
Respected Chairperson, sir, members of the House, honorable judges, and my most worthy opponents. I know that a lot of you today are very obliged to applaud your friends' answers or their arguments, but I understand that you have been bored to sleep by the arguments of the opposition. And that is because of the very fact that their argument stands in no way in this debate. And hence, I will prove to you in very succinct ways, in very small ways, how their arguments have in no way stood. And I will further elucidate about the third aspect or the third constructive which my lead speaker has talked about how the ideals of democracy that have been preached so far are very much different from the tenets of democracy, which are the very founding principles of democracy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk in the beginning about the tenets of democracy and the ideals of democracy. Understand that when they talk about the fact that we have freedom of expression, we have freedom from oppression, we have the right to equality, which is so enshrined in the Indian Constitution as well. We must understand that these were tactics used by Western democracies in post-World War II situations to market the kind of democracy, because at that point of time there were only 11 democracies that struggled to find their way in the world at that point of time. Now, to market that kind of democracy, they needed to show that these were very salient points of argument that could prove that democracy was better than the forms of government that existed at that point of time. However, ladies and gentlemen, tell me, do the people of China not have the right to equality? Understand, ladies and gentlemen, that there is an example of Cuba, where in the 1970s there was the Batista government, which was extremely nepotistic, which was a democratic government, mind you, and it was overthrown to bring in a dictatorship which brought about the development of the country in ways that have gone beyond the scope or the imagination of the opposition today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we must understand that the basic tenets of democracy are the fact that the government or the system of governance have been created for the people, by the people, and of the people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when we come to that entire concept, my lead speaker has come up and my second speaker has come up and proven beyond doubt that the needs of the people are different from the wants of the people. And the way in which people show that they want things in the government, or the way in which they need to be governed, are different from the way, or are different in the way in which they need to be governed and they want to be governed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a simple analogy to prove this. The Lucknow football team will probably come up and say that they are very energy hungry. They need energy to strive on a field, and at halftime they need a lot of energy back in their bodies. They may resort to eating gulab jamuns, or in this case kebabs, and however, that may not be the best way in which to retain or get back their energy. The best way probably would be to have electrolyte or to have a simple glucose D to get into that form of energy which they need to be able to perform well on the field. And that is exactly what the proposition is trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen. When the lead speaker of the proposition comes up and tells that power is in the hands of the masses in the democracy, understand, ladies and gentlemen, that most of these countries which are moving into forms of democracies, like in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, there have been mobocracies which have taken over, which have led to the formation of things like the burning down of government buildings. There have been burning down of planes which have happened in the Ukrainian revolution. And hence, this is what they feel is the best form of government. Ladies and gentlemen, they have told you about the right to self-determination and how there is freedom of the media which is suppressed in countries like China. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in a democracy like India, there was the Muzaffarnagar riots, which happened because of a video which was leaked, which was part of the media. And understand this, ladies and gentlemen, that the fact that these communal riots were incited is the way in which they equate that this is the best form of government, that democracy is the best form of government. And here, I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the proposition has beyond doubt proved to you how democracy is definitely not the best form of government. A meritocracy might be. Thank you.
Okay.
So you talked about how the Muzaffarnagar riots were actually incited by a video which was released, and how the freedom of press is responsible for that. So do you actually prefer living in a country like China, where we do not have the freedom of the press, and where only things which seem good for the government and which are good for the reputation of the government are printed, and the rest of the things which are actually bad for the government in the world community, they are not printed at all, and you don't even get to know about whether a Muzaffarnagar riot happened at all or not?
So the reach of the press today in the world is far, far and very wide. And its coverage encompasses things which are of international and global importance. Now, ladies and gentlemen, understand this, that when we talk about the fact that there is freedom of the media or the freedom of press in countries like India, where the Muzaffarnagar riots have happened, and there has been no freedom of the press as such in countries like China, we understand that there are flaws in every form of government which have come about. You yourself have conceded to that. But understand, ladies and gentlemen, that when we talk about the fact that in a democracy also, the way in which you talked about the fact that freedom of media has been detrimental, we have been able to conclude and show you that in the same way, democracy has been flawed in its approach to this. We have shown you that in an essence, a comparative cost-benefit analysis, that democracy in that aspect cannot stand above a communist regime, and hence cannot be called the better or the best form of government.
You still have time. No, there's somebody else in your team who wants to ask a question.
Thank you.
Sir, you praised and glorified communist regimes and said that in democracies we have seen how monuments and religious and...
No, I'll interrupt there. Did you actually praise and glorify?
No, sir.
There are a lot of inferences, implied, your speech is forgotten. So would you clarify that as a first question?
So could I hear the entire question?
Yeah, attend to that first. Did you glorify?
So I don't glorify communist regimes or do not, or as the proposition, do not promote any other form of government at this point of time. But as the burden of the proposition today, I simply come to you and show you that democracy is definitely not the best form of government.
Okay, you
And-
didn't
and
clarify.
just,
So
just
please
to follow up,
continue. Yeah,
do you
please,
show
please.
that by saying that communism is better?
Did you
Sorry?
say communism is better?
So I drew parallels to show that if you're talking about, if you're talking comparatively, as you stated earlier in your speech, saying that in your degree of superlatives and comparatives, that you have to have a situation where democracy is better on that count, then I come up and give you examples of how in these forms of government, there have been instances where the various kinds of crimes that have been committed, as you said, in communist regimes or to that matter, dictatorships or autocracies, have been in the same manner in which these kinds of wrongs have been committed in democracies. And hence, when you're trying to make a comparison between these two systems,
Point taken.
there can be no thing which
taken.
comes out as better.
Point taken. Thank you. Thank you. That was
Well done, sir.
That was a very interesting exchange of, and something very interesting that came up. There's something wrong with the chairs here, Mr. McFarlane. One fell there. That was a Lucknow chair, was it? Yours was a Lucknow chair. Another Lucknow chair there. Sorry. No. The other interesting thing that has come up now is, and I'm not being biased, it's up to you to counter that, or to the audience to decipher, or for the judges to understand. It came up fairly late. The aspect of democracy, tenets and ideals versus as it is practiced. Now, certainly the motion is not talking about democracy as it is practiced, but on the other hand, democracy is democracy as it is practiced. So it's a very interesting point that has come up, and I'm not passing a judgment on it. I have no right to do that. The next speaker from, yes, Lucknow, Anand Khanna. Sorry, it was on the other. Anand Khanna, the third speaker from Lucknow.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's debate is democracy is not the best form of government, and I stand here again to oppose this motion. Now, I do not know about the Calcutta crowd, but I assure the previous speaker that the students from Lucknow, as has been seen by their cheering, are wide awake throughout this debate. Now, before I begin my constructives, I would like to point out some of the flaws, the inherent flaws in the arguments of the proposition. The first speaker talked about how the brevity of the government's rule prevents them from working for the people. I tell you, it is an incentive to work for the people when they know that there is a judgment day coming ahead, and the judgment lies in the hands of the people. Their future lies in the hands of the people. Moving on. The flaw of the incomplete voter turnout can be, will be, and has to be taken care of by enhancing the application of democracy. It cannot be removed. Removing of democracy will not solve this problem at all. Moving on, the second speaker talked about policy paralysis and how the people are not represented completely. I ask you, where will they be represented completely? In a monarchy? In an oligarchy? In an aristocracy? Which one? I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, the answer still will remain a democracy. Now, the people are elected by a totalitarian. The people are elected, meritorious people are elected by a totalitarian government, are elected as a totalitarian government by the people, which is exactly a democracy, as the second speaker in his question asked. Moving on to my constructives. All around the world we have seen, in various periods, in various times, in various ages, that people have tried out other forms of governments, monarchies, aristocracies, oligarchies, various others. And without fail, invariably, the people have returned to democracy. They have thrown off the shackles of these other governances and have moved on to democracy, because they know that a democracy will do what is best for them, and no other government promises that. Now, why I say this, I'll put forward some examples to prove to you that the people have invariably moved to democracy in the past and have done so in the present. Now, South Korea, which was previously a non-democratic state and is now a democratic state by the fight of the people, is now a very robust democracy which is widely accepted by the people. I shall prove to you how. The various points that lead to the success of a democracy in South Korea are in fact all the points that are the successful points of a democracy. Over. the turnover of power from one hand to another, from one political party to another, from one faction to another, improve the chances of every small minority, every person becoming an equal shareholder in the governance of a nation, in the reform and the development of the nation. As an example, the Samajwadi Party that represents the farmers, the BSP that represents the Dalits. Now, as the power changes, we see that the people, the minorities, the Dalits, as well as the farmers, in turn become the shareholders, the stakeholders of the development of a nation. Secondly, the successful inflection of people like leftists and liberalists into the government improves the scope of ideological scope of development for the nation, allowing for openness, flexibility, and liberalism. Finally, elite pact making between various factions, which is considered by many to be undemocratic, actually causes great progress because of the fact that there is smooth transition between two forms of government. There is a compromise and there is development between forms of government that would have ideologically opposed each other if not for these pact making. Now, another example is that of the Arab Spring, where numerous countries put forward their foot forward and toppled dictatorships that they were so sick and tired of and brought in democracies. Those which did not bring in democracies are still striving because they know, the people know that the democracy is that which is best for them, which will do most for them. And we see that if a democracy is not established, another form of government is established, then it will lead to another revolution. And why we say that a democracy is the best form of government, I'd like to sum up in one small question to the House. In which other form of government do we as a people get legal rights to oppose the president of our nation if his acts are not in coherence with our thoughts, with our hopes, with our aspirations? Here I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your speech. So there is a saying that Chinese prosper because of their governmental structure, whereas Indians prosper, whatever the little they do, despite their government. Today we have spoken to you about the Chinese governmental structure, and you highlighted one of those examples in your speech as well. Do you not believe that by having the structure of government that China actually does, not exactly being a democratic form of government, not only being able to achieve a much comparatively higher growth rate, but also achieved equality in the true sense of the term by aspiring to be a socialist country?
Mr. Interjector, thank you for your question. We must understand the fact that economic growth is not all that all a country needs. Economic development is also needed. Small rights like freedom of the press, that we know what faults the government has, or very small right of getting to name.
One minute. What was your question again, please?
So my question was simply to bring about the point that we have provided alternative forms of government, as given the example of China. Do you not think that by having the form of government that China does, they have not only achieved a higher growth rate than a country like India, but also have achieved equality in the true sense of the socialistic word by having that form of government?
The specific question, as I understand, pertains to China. Can you answer that?
Sir, I'm sorry.
His question pertains to China. Can you answer that?
Exactly, so that's what I'm answering. Small rights like freedom of the press, like knowing what the government's faults are, or even the right to name your children, are not given to the people in China, and we believe these small rights are part of economic growth, economic development. Economic growth is not all we can harp on about. Economic development is essential to the overall development of the people of the nation, because just numbers, statistics are not actually what constitute development. The people must rise, the people must develop, and that is why we say that India, that democracy, is better than socialism.
Does that you have one more, or do your teammates have another one?
I would like
you do. Yeah,
so firstly, regarding this answer, if Chinese did not give them their citizens right to have children, then they wouldn't be the most populated country in the world, sir. Coming to my second question, you spoke about the fact that today, when the political parties know that they will not be re-elected if they do not perform, if they underperform, and that actually helps provide an incentive to them, a guarantee to perform. Do you not believe that when one political party goes out of power and another political party comes in, the first thing that the latter does is undo the good of the first, and therefore what they do is basically take a regressive measure and take us back to square one, as seen recently with the policies of the Narendra Modi government, where they have first done away with everything of the UPA
What's the
government.
question?
The question is,
Yeah.
sir, to be more specific, do you not think that by this system of governance that we have, where people are re-elected and are not re-elected where they don't perform, one political party actually undoes the good that is done by the previous regime and therefore becomes regressive?
That's the question. Yeah.
First off, I never said children that Chinese people do not have rights to give birth to children. First off, even though they do not have right to give birth to more than one child.
I
as
think
of
we
now.
are going off on a tangent.
So I'm
with
just
children.
answering
Yeah,
as
please.
by parts. I'm answering his questions. Then, secondly, I talked about the
I'm
fact
sorry. I'm sorry. Train nikal gayi.
Okay.
Please, sorry. We have to end this. Yeah, it's over. Yeah, interjection is over. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is interesting. I can't help commenting on this. This goes back 40 years, you know. When we used to debate, we used to prepare a month earlier, rehearse in front of the mirror and all that. And we used to pick up patent jokes. And Michael Halge, my teacher, was very good with patent jokes. And this China thing reminds me about a joke which I used everywhere. In Loreto College here in Calcutta, Martiniere, it was a Chinese, no, it was a needle which the Chinese drilled a hole through. And when it came to India, India did made in India stamp on that. And it always worked very well. So I was reminded of that today about China. But today it was about babies in any case. Okay. Now, we are on to the end. It's going to be winding up session. And it's up to the opposition. Right? You got 5 minutes. No, sorry, 4 minutes. I'm glad you're conscious of time. I was going to give you one more. 4 minutes. And there's no bell. Am I right? Oh, 3 plus 1. So you got a bell going.
Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. Restating the topic of today's debate, this House believes that a democracy is not the best form of government. Ladies and gentlemen, the word best is a comparative word. When we say that democracy is the best form of government, we are comparing it to all the forms of government that exist in today's world. We are comparing it to all the forms of government that in the past have existed in this world. So when we say that democracy today is the best form of government, we are saying that democracy is not perfect. Democracy is the best when you compare it to all the other forms, because it provides us with all the things we have been talking about throughout our speeches, and other forms of government fail to give the citizens all those things, and that is why they fail the objective of being a good government. And ladies and gentlemen, that is one point which the proposition today has completely missed. They had to come up here and talk to you about how democracy is not the best form of government because, well, we have this form of government which is better. But they did not do that. They just came up and talked to you about the flaws of democracy. And we never said that democracy is perfect. We said that, yes, democracy has flaws. But even with its flaws, even with the imperfections a democracy has, it is the best form of government. And it is the job of the proposition now. And I really expect that they come back to the topic and refute this argument in their summing up. It is the job of the proposition now to talk to you and explain us how, with all its flaws and imperfections, democracy is still not better than others. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they talked about how opinions are misused by the government. I spoke to you and I told you how those opinions will never be voiced in a country like China. They talked about the will of 100%, how the will of 100% majority is not expressed. I told you that even if 70% is expressed, the will of the people is expressed, and that is not possible in other forms of government. Third, they talked about stagnation because there are a lot of ideas and they lead to a lot of conflicts, and that is why we should not have a lot of ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, now this is something I did not expect from the proposition today, because we living in a country like India, saw what happened with the Aam Aadmi Party. Even though they were a big failure, I am not a fan of the Aam Aadmi Party. Even if they were a big failure, Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand that the fact that they got a platform to come up, the fact that they were able to stir up a whole revolution against the current system is only possible in a democracy. And ladies and gentlemen, that is something all of us should value. Next, ladies and gentlemen, they talked about how fundamental freedoms, etc., can also be there in other forms of government in theory. Ladies and gentlemen, so in theory, we won't have any of the flaws you were discussing about democracy. We are today here talking about the practical aspects of democracy, and we are talking to you how even though democracy has a lot of flaws, it is still the best form of government for us. Next, ladies and gentlemen, they talked about how then they answered that question finally. They said we need a meritocracy where we have capable people instead of gundas elected through the masses. Ladies and gentlemen, they just agreed with our motion when they said elected through the masses. Even if you have a meritocracy elected through the masses, it is a form of democracy. And that is what we are also today in the opposition saying. So in effect, they proposed a different sort of government when we asked them to, and it turned out to be a form of democracy itself. So ladies and gentlemen, understand that today democracy is the best form of government. Next, ladies and gentlemen, they talked about China and how it has a higher growth rate and how that is why India should today become, forget that, how China has a big growth rate today and how it is better for communism is better than democracy. But the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, I in my first speech talked to you about how the role of a government is not just to give economic progress to people, it is to fulfill the aspirations of the people. It is to fulfill the needs of the people, and that is what China does not do with 15,000 protests taking place every day. So ladies and gentlemen, we spoke to you about how in a democracy, the real power lies with the masses. We spoke to you about human rights and fundamental freedoms, which only a democracy gives us. We spoke to you about an independent judiciary. We spoke to you about how we have a scope to correct our mistakes in a democracy. We spoke to you about how we have a right to protest and right to criticize the government. And ladies and gentlemen, with all its imperfections and with all its flaws, ladies and gentlemen, our democracy does not give us the best. It protects us from the worst. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very proud to oppose.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Calcutta Lamatne.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back here to sum up the arguments on behalf of my team. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a democracy where I am allowed to say what I want to. However, in context of today's debate, I was asked not to be personal by my teachers, by Mr. Manasdev, which is why instead of saying that the opposition has a hole in the head, allow me to say that the opposition is very, very open-minded. Ladies and gentlemen, they have said that the clouds are made of cotton candy. They have said that the streams are filled with melted chocolate. And they have said that democracy is the purest form of government that purges us of any form of impediment to our development. Ladies and gentlemen, they have negated, however, that we live in a reality that is not the same reality that exists in their minds. We live in a reality where democracy is abused, where the concept of democracy and the theory behind democratic institutions like checks and balances, the theory behind democratic institutions such as power in the hands of the masses is indeed an impediment to the very development and can lead to regression in a country. Ladies and gentlemen, whereas we have given alternatives, they have not countered a point of a meritocracy. A meritocracy is not synonymous to a system of governance wherein the people have the right to vote. We have talked to you about China, a system of governance which has excelled beyond all measures, a system of governance which can indeed afford freedom of rights and freedom of expressions and human rights, which they seem to be the sole champions of. This system can survive and can bring us more fruit. But ladies and gentlemen, just because that has not been done today does not negate the fact that these systems are perhaps and indeed better than a democratic system. Ladies and gentlemen, they asked me a question on my first speech, a rather redundant question. They said, what according to you then are the better forms of government? I am not Aristotle. I am not Socrates. My job here is to show you that in a democratic system of governance, we cannot and we fail to maximize our potentialities as a nation. Ladies and gentlemen, whereas we have been arguing the concepts of governance, ladies and gentlemen, that concepts of governance that can allow full development of our very being. Now, the systems of dictatorships, communist systems, monarchies can do away with vote bank politics. They can do away with bureaucratic entangles and policy paralysis that in theory exist in all democratic institutions, in all democratic nations, and they can retain the fundamental rights and principles which they seem to be the sole champions of. And this system, in fact, might be able to benefit us, might bring us more fruit. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not saying that we must today convert to a dictatorship or a communist government. That is not feasible, because we have been indoctrinated with the cognitive bias that democracy is the be-all and end-all of governance. I am not saying that. All I am saying is that democracy inhibits our potentialities. Ladies and gentlemen, they spoke about power in the hands of the masses. I talked to you about the masses often being uneducated, the masses often being obstinate in their opinions, in their views, which is why it leads to regression. When you place this power in the hands of the masses in a democracy, which is indeed counterproductive to the very ideals that we try to achieve when we say we want a better form of governance. They spoke about checks and balances. My second speaker very, very succinctly showed you and has proven to you beyond an iota of doubt that these checks and balance act as an impediment, because concentration of resources is towards retaining power. We forget that that the governments are indeed elected for the betterment of the people. And how many democracies world over have this system of checks and balances that are so very purely implemented? I'd rather not get into that. Ladies and gentlemen, they spoke about voter turnouts. Let me tell you that in many, many democracies, you have voter turnouts less than 15%. I said 75 out of 1,000 voters might vote. That does not represent the views of the majority. I did not say 70%. I was misquoted. Before coming to Uttar Pradesh, I read up about this state. I came across a term called love jihad. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have witnessed what is called logic jihad. Their logic is that because democracy has stood the test of time, because democracy has survived, and it is the survival of the fittest concept that they want to propagate, we must not even look at other forms of government that are perhaps, and that are definitely more idealistic in our conquest, in our pursuit of a better form of governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All these concluding arguments have been very, very convincing. The one thing that hasn't been mentioned of all the ocracies or whatever, ISI-ocracy, which is a new form of government which is ruling the world, you've missed out on. Maybe next time round, huh? Deal with Pakistan. Anyway, as far as the judges are concerned, the debate is over, and you may retire to deliberate, to discuss what the scores are going to be, who's won, who's going to be winning. The fourth speaker from the proposition, Ujjon, if I get the Bengali right, Puro Kaisto, right? Am I right? Please.
Hello. Yes. Respected Chairperson, sir, members of the House, honorable judges, and of course my most worthy opponents. Now, first and foremost, I would like to highlight their main point, or should I say only point, which they have brought up so far, is that if there is a good, better, and the best, there is also a bad, worse, and the worst. And because in our living society there is only the bad, worse, and worst, that the bad is only the best amongst the other worst and the worst. But what we as a proposition have tried to prove to you today is that there exists a best form of government that we can propose, that we can look towards, and we can develop towards. So let us understand what has happened today. Let me tell you about the mob conundrum. The entire concept of the home stadium crowd, right? We have the entire Lucknow contingent here, and we have the extreme home support, and we have them all rooting for the Lucknow team. Now, this is the common opinion, right? Because this is the majority of the opinion. But the fact of the matter remains that it is side proposition that has made the better arguments. The fact of the matter remains that it is side proposition that is going to be the winning team. So the fact of the matter remains that if democracy is to be preached, and if you do want the majority of the opinion to be taken into account, what you need to first look at is that majority opinion true? Because in this case, the majority opinion is definitely false, because it is the proposition who have made the better arguments. Now, let me talk to you about some effects of democracy which has been completely neglected by them. They came and spoke of human rights violations. Let me talk to you about Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was also democratically elected with a 33% majority first time
he got with the Nazi party in 1938, and then he went on to get the majority in the next year election, and therefore he formed his government democratically. And I don't think I need to tell anyone in this hall about the great things that happened right after that, right? What Adolf Hitler has done through a how he has manipulated the democratically constituted form of elections. So understand that if the common opinion of the people is flawed, and if there is not a wise person to come along and tell you that, look, your common opinion is flawed, and here I stop you, and here I'm not letting you go forward. What is happening is that that common opinion is being allowed to thrive, and you're going from bad to worse to worst. You will never progress from good to better to best. So understand, ladies and gentlemen, if we are to talk about the mob conundrum, if we are to talk about democratic institutions in general, what they have completely neglected is the fact that we have also proposed the system of a meritocracy. We have also spoken about China. Their burden of proof today was to break down our argument. But they have brought up simply one constructive, saying that there is a good, there is a better, there is a best. But in this case, that doesn't apply, because everyone is just bad. And because democracy is at bad, and because worst is really far away from democracy, therefore democracy is the best because it is bad. I think that's their logic. They want to concede to the fact that since their arguments are bad, they should be considered the best. But this doesn't make any sense, not only to the proposition, I'm sure it doesn't make sense to anyone in this house today. Now, the first speaker comes up here.
No, I think your second bell is over. No, sorry, I'm so sorry.
All right, thank you, sir. Right, the second speaker comes up, he talks about the entire good, better, best, and everything that I've talked about so far. But he also tries to limit this debate to the whole concepts of capitalism versus communism. And they fail to understand that this debate is not a capitalism versus communism debate. They fail to understand that you cannot equate communism as the opposite of democracy, because communism is an economic theory where you have the people of the nation not owning any private property, where all the property belongs to the state. And they have somehow tried to bring this as a negative aspect, and they have tried to tell you that in no way can you have the freedoms that you have in democracy, in communism, or other such governments. But we are here to tell you that that is not what the debate is restricted to. We are here to tell you that if you want an alternative, we have proposed a meritocracy, and we have broken down every single aspect of a democracy that has existed and has been practiced today. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Oh, John, that was really good. You spoke about 33% Adolf Hitler. I hope you don't forget 32%, and we got to go back to Calcutta, sometime. No. Anyway, Yash Joshi.
Good evening. Firstly, I would like to clarify one thing. Nobody needs to feel sorry for team opposition today, because we have been proud to defend democracy, proud to defend a government of the people, by the people, for the people, proud to defend the ideals which our founding fathers so fought for. Now, I would like to return Calcutta's favor by highlighting their main point. I'm sorry, they had no viable points there. Now, I agree with Tanuj. Throughout this debate, there has been a void, a certain hole around somewhere here. And what that has done has come, it's like a, a warp which has sucked all the logic out of team proposition. Now, I like his humility. He said he's not Aristotle or Socrates, apparently not even a decent debater. Now, second speaker comes up and says that they're not here bashing, decrying, or demeaning democracy or its concept. I agree, they merely tried to do that. But he did succeed in memorizing the thesaurus. Now, moving on to the third speaker, I really don't know what he said, because his sweet voice and lullaby-like arguments made me sleep. Now, coming to the topic, I just like to say that we in team opposition have accepted that there is a gap between what democracy is in its principle and the way that it is implemented. But what we have said that its implementation amongst all the other forms of government is the best. Now, the fourth speaker of proposition was a big fan of giving analogies. So let me give one of my own. Cal today hit a new low in terms of debating, but still the principal speaker was better amongst all of them. That's why he's the best speaker in their team, which is how we have defended democracy. The truth is that there is no other form of government that is existent today or that we know of which is better than democracy or even comes up to democracy. At the end of the day, democracy is undeniably the best form of government. It's the end aim of every state. It's the people's government. It's your government, it's my government, and here's where it gets really beautiful. It's still the government of the ungrateful members of the proposition. And to conclude, I would like to give a friendly advice to my friends from Calcutta. Please do try our kebabs. They trump your gulab jamuns any day. Thank you.
I really must confess, there was no parliamentary language, thank God, because that means something else. There was unparliamentary language, which this debate really stands out. Thank God it was not parliamentary, because you know what happens in Parliament. This was really lovely. Thank you, all of you. It was very, very sporting, very, very good sport. I just want to say, before calling, and I know there'll be a lot of speakers and there are such lovely young kids who come up in Calcutta. I've come up here after so many years. Thank you, Mr. McFarlane. But I just want to say, it's been fun, it's been great, and if there was no cricket, there'd be no fun in India. 8 test playing nations, maybe 14, 16 playing some form of other cricket. We go wild. We love our democracy. We love our elections. We go crazy, and that's fun. And I'm not prejudicing the judges because they've gone. I remember these good old slogans, you know. क्या था वो बिहार में? जब तक रहेगा समोसे में आलू, तब तक रहे Bihar mein lalu. Come on. That's democracy. And out of school, you know, it was a bad time for Indira Gandhi, emergency and all that. And then she lost Amethi. She went to Chikmagalur, a by-election she was fighting. And I remember that my first year in college, I was doing canteen honors in St. Xavier's. It was Ek Sherni, So Langur, Chikmagalur, Chikmagalur. Now, where will you get that lovely thing? That's democracy. And that's the spirit of democracy. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Now from the floor, the young kids, I love them the way they come up in Calcutta. But I would like Lucknow kids to come up, at least, you know, that graciousness of Lucknow, someone please defend Calcutta, please, that would be nice. It never happens in Calcutta. Some of you, please speak for the motion. Some defend your school, that would be lovely. And please announce your name, that would be nice. And you get a minute at best. Okay, your name?
This is Gaurav Chopra here, feeling very nostalgic, coming here after 7 years. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just take you back to your class 1 lecture. Man is a social animal. You define it as a social animal. Now, there was a gentleman who came up here and just said that a better form of government than democracy, where people still elect. Agreed? So, still, what are you getting? You are getting a form of democracy. Man is a social animal. Man is an animal. He has civilized to become a social animal. You are making democracy, you are further defining democracy into a better form. It will always remain a democracy. It will be a democracy. Mr. Chairman, sir, I seriously found that you were quite against, with all due respect, quite against democracy during the course of the debate. Anyways, sir, you talked about ideals versus practicals. You talk about ideals versus practicals about democracy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no one came up here to talk about United States, about Russia or any other nation. Ladies and gentlemen, this topic nowhere stated India. Let us take the example of USA, economic growth you are talking about in China.
The chairman is not going to be intervening because you've accused him. The timekeeper is.
That's the first bell, sir. That's the first bell. Get the first bell. Anyways, to conclude, please let us take about the economic growth of USA, of other nations like UK. What about those nations? Think about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lovely, lovely. And there's somebody for the motion, predictably from Calcutta. Oh no.
I am Joybi Gupta from the Martiniere Calcutta swimming team, and I'm speaking for the motion. Today I have another analogy for you. If I eat a bad kebab, it doesn't mean that kebabs in general taste bad. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at a dictatorship or if you look at a different form of government, just because one specific government wasn't run well, doesn't mean the concept of that form of government is bad. When you look at a dictatorship, just because Hitler's dictatorship wasn't run well, doesn't mean that the concept of dictatorship as a form of government is bad. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need to attribute that to Hitler, that despite all his failings, his government, his administration was run efficiently. Thus, we find that even if a form of government, even if a specific government is not run well, that form of government or the concept of that government is not flawed. Thank you.
Thank you. I suspect I heard this kebab thing in the girls' school today. Did I? But Mrs. Abraham never invited me for her kebabs. I missed that. Sorry, didn't mean that.
Good evening, everybody.
Please introduce yourself. Yeah.
My name is Lakshita and I'm in class 7 from the Lucknow swimming team.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why the proposition boils down every single debate to kebabs even when it doesn't fit the content. Are we that stupid that we'll eat kebabs during a football match? Even if it doesn't give us energy, but will make us drowsy and sleepy. Thank you.
Lovely. So there's Calcutta again for Calcutta. Lucknow is lagging behind. Please.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Misam Hashmi, and I'm from the Martiniere for Girls debating team. Well, there were just 2 points that I would like to make that I noticed during the course of the debate. The first one was when the opposition comes up here and says that yes, members of the House, it is perfectly all right if we have gundas as our ministers, if we have gundas as people who are leading us. Members of the House, even though we are the ones who are electing them, the moment we say that we have thugs on the seat of power in a nation, that is the moment, members of the House, when the government as a whole has not only proved itself to be not the best, but in fact failed. Members of the House, the proposition comes up in here and says very clearly that yes, democracy is a good form of government. In fact, democracy is a better form of government. But how can we say that democracy is the best form of government, even when we live in a democracy and we know, members of the House, that sometimes when we speak against certain leaders, we are thrown behind bars. members of the House, the opposition comes up here and speaks about liberties, about freedoms. If the democracy in practice in today's world is not guaranteeing us the right, those freedoms, those liberty, how can we say that the democracy in practice in today's world, I'm not talking about the theory, but the democracy in practice in today's world is the best form of government? When we talk about the best form of government, we mean a government which as a whole is in fact flawless, maybe in theory and to some extent even in practice, but no members of the House. I do not see how democracy is near flawless in today's day and age. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We take one more. From Lucknow.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Radhika Mehra, and I'm the member of the debating team from the Martiniere Girls College, Lucknow. Now, I would like to bring up one of the arguments brought up by Team Proposition today. They mentioned that one of the flaws of democracy is a clash of opinions. Well, according to me, democracy provides us an equal opportunity to voice our opinions. And the credible evidence to support what I just said is not far behind. The fact that the second speaker of the proposition came up, openly accused, and voiced his opinions about the Akhilesh Yadav government or the Mamata Banerjee government proves my point. And that is the beauty of democracy, ladies and gentlemen. And well, I'm not surprised when they say that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. And that is the reason why democracy, and I quote the members of the proposition, is the most popular and convenient form of government. It has stood the test of times, and in short, it is undoubtedly the best form of government. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nobody accused Mamata Banerjee, I can assure you. Nobody did. I can assure you. Oh, I'm so... I thought that was the last. Please. Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Upasana Ranjeev from the Martiniere swimming team. It is only a democracy that grants the citizens certain fundamental rights and freedoms. I would just like to point out here that today we are here debating, expressing our views and ideas only because democracy gives us the freedom of expression, thoughts, and speech. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last. Yeah?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dhruv, I'm in class 11, and the topic today states that democracy is not the best form of government. And I stand here strongly opposing the motion. First of all, proposition today gave us a very good tongue twister, good, better, best, bad, worse. However, ladies and gentlemen, what the opposition today is trying to say is that since if there is no good, better or best, bad automatically becomes the best. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, if there is not a better form of government, democracy, though, yes, there are some flaws, and there are flaws in each and every form of government. But since it is the best amongst each and every form of government, it is the best form of government. Ladies and gentlemen, they talk about corruption. However, corruption, a form of system is not to be blamed for corruption. It is who are to be blamed for the corruption and not a form of a system, whether it is parliamentary, presidential, totalitarian, authoritarian, etc., etc.
I think you need to wind up. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. This exercise will take won't take very long. It's an exercise beyond school, and I know this is going to be prejudiced, but I planned it when I started from Calcutta. Can we have a raise of hand for the motion? Lucknow, where's your graciousness? Come on. Okay. The motion has carried. You were very good. You should cut short. You know, you are very precise, but you carry on. You're damn good. You're incisive. Uh, the best speaker? Hands? No. Okay. In Bengali, Orko Banerjee. But I just told Orko when I shook hands with him, his arguments are very cogent, but he tends to carry on. He could have stopped 3 sentences, it was done. Wish you well. Now, may I, Mr. McFarlane, please, may you please take over? And now the debate is closed.
Ladies and gentlemen, my thanks this evening to our very honorable chairperson for handling this debate with such efficiency, a touch of professionalism, and the ability to understand that young people must say their thing, but also need to know how they must say it within a certain paradigm, within certain parameters of decency. We have had a most interesting and stimulating debate. The arguments from both sides have indeed been outstanding. Personally, I am very proud of the boys from Lucknow. While at the same time recognizing that the victory that Calcutta has won this evening is indeed well deserved. I will call upon our chairman to kindly distribute certificates and prizes, and he shall be assisted by Mr. Alfred Gomes, who will hand over the trophies, etc., at the appropriate time. For the participating certificates, to the runner-up team, Raghav Kohli as the principal speaker, Mohammad Zaid, our captain, Anand Khanna, and Yash Joshi. Members of the winning team. Captain of the Calcutta team, Tanuj Luthra. Orka Banerjee Chaudhary. Aditya Sarkar, and Ujjan Purakaista. And the Best Speaker Award, which includes a certificate and a cup, goes to Arka Banerjee Chaudhary. The runner-up trophy for the Inter-Martiniere debate goes to La Martiniere, Lucknow. And the shield for the winning team, La Martiniere College, Kolkata. And I'm happy to announce that Lucknow takes the cake. And never too far behind, Kolkata takes the cake as well. May I request Mr. Gomes to please escort our chairman down. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here with us this evening. Despite some of the delightfully rude things that people have tried to say to each other, I am sure we recognize that this is a schoolboy banter, that Tanuj is not a lousy debater. He's one of my most outstanding debaters on stage today. And that both kebabs and gulab jamuns make a wonderful treat. Do join us on the lawn for that. The students of all the schools will please remain seated until our invited guests have left the hall, and you may then come onto the lawns to share dinner with us.
Good evening, once again, ladies and gentlemen. It is my duty and my honor to congratulate the Kolkata contingent on their absolutely well-deserved victory and to call for cheers. So, 3 cheers for our chairperson. Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! 3 cheers for the Kolkata contingent. Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! 3 cheers for the Lucknow contingent. Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! And lastly, 3 cheers for La Martiniere. Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! Hip hip hip! Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Could we have 3 cheers for our principals and vice principals? Hip hip. Hip hip. Hip hip. Could we have 3 cheers for our debating secretaries who have taught us so well in the art of debating? Hip hip. Hip hip. Hip hip. Could we have 3 cheers for La Martiniere? Hip hip. Hip hip. Hip hip. Thank you.